You're listening to Unfinished Minds,
a podcast about learning, teaching, and staying curious in a messy, ever-changing world.
We're Amy and Ben, partners in life and in business. We've spent the last 20 years exploring what it means to learn on purpose, whether in classrooms, in companies, or in parenting.
Each week, we pick a big question and have an honest conversation about how people grow, what it means to teach well, and why learning still matters, especially when the world feels uncertain.
Whether you're a parent, a teacher, a leader, or just a curious soul, we're glad you're here.
Today we're talking about whether we ever outgrow grades and marks.
Yes. And I think for most people out there, they might have a reaction of, yay, I was great at that. Gold stars for me. I got all A's. And it might be sort of a source of pride. And there's probably people out there who, had their marks haunt their dreams and still do. So yeah, I'm really keen to see how we unpack this.
Which one are you?
Oh, I was good at school. I say I was a good student in quotation marks in that respect. I got good grades for most of my scholastic career. And I don't think as a kid I could have imagined a successful learning experience without getting a good grade on it. I went after them. And when I didn't get the ones that I wanted, I despaired. It was a source of stress and a source of pride.
So what is this conversation going to be like for you then, if we're dissecting and maybe tearing that whole mechanism apart?
Well, here's the thing. That's what my life was like as a student. And then when I got on the other side of the desk and I was a teacher, my feelings about grades and marks changed a lot, both because it required a lot of thought and intention to figure out what grades to give people, how to decide what grades to give people. But I used to teach bigger kids, and at the end of every semester, there would be this negotiation process where, I'd have people coming up to my desk going, I just need 2 more marks, or I just need a plus on this grade, or something like that. And it was kind of relentless. And at the end of it, I would feel like, is this what you got from this whole semester? All this effort I put into teaching and making things fun and interesting, and all you want from me is a number or a letter. And it felt really defeating as a teacher to
and I think every single teacher will have that feeling
every
single semester from probably almost every student. So we're talking about something pretty systemic here.
Yes. I don't know very many parents that can divorce themselves from that too when it comes to the learning process of their children.
And make no mistake, we're not talking about throwing the baby out with the bathwater or being impractical or super duper rose colored. The reality is there isn't enough time for teachers to give individual students enough individual attention and enough individual assessment. I don't know that there is some magic bullet solution to this, but I'm really looking forward to exploring this with you.
Yeah, I think it's always good, both as a teacher and a learner, to sort of peel back the way we do things and ask, is this actually getting us where we need to go? Is this actually accomplishing what we want in education and learning?
And I'm excited to explore how that weaves forward into our working lives.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think you and I both, as entrepreneurs and employers, have probably had our minds shifted and changed a little bit about how we feel about marks too.
Yeah, I kind of want to tell the story of when our kid came home one day to talk about one of their classes.
Yeah, I think it was the English teacher. And this is high school. So as parents, we went all the way until high school before we had a teacher, reach out and say, I don't think I'm going to do marks the way we usually do.
Yeah. And you and I were both like, woo, cheering. And our kid was not nearly as excited.
I think my reaction was more like, ooh, that's interesting.
Really interesting.
How are you going to do that? And I think I actually reached out to the teacher too and said, ooh, that's interesting. How are you going to do that?
Well, you can fill in some gaps perhaps. But my big takeaway of the methodology that this teacher is using, and we're not through this semester yet, so we'll see how it goes, was about lots of feedback being given. The student building for themselves a portfolio that it's really evidence for a negotiation process that happens at the end of the semester, whereby the student says, I deserve an 89.3 and here's why. And I have a lot of feelings about that, both really intrigued, but also quite curious about how fair is that? And, are you really marking someone's English skills in this case, or are you marking their negotiation skills, their ability to be confident and present a case?
Oh, those are English skills anyway.
Okay, bad example. I've been thinking a lot about in preparation for this discussion, but also just in general, maybe that's actually the best way to prepare someone for their working life.
Well, let's springboard off that. Let's ask the question, are there subject areas? Are there parts of our academic career as well as parts of, life in general that don't lend themselves well to letter grades and numbers? And I can speak to that having taught almost exclusively in the humanities, philosophy, English.
Mm.
It's really hard to stick, an objective, quantitative measurement on someone's creativity or how well someone argued something or how well they expressed themselves. That's really slippery. And I've always had a problem with marks in those subject areas for that reason, that I'd never want anyone to feel discouraged as a thinker or a creator because they didn't get a certain number. I don't know that that's a measurement of success in some subjects.
Okay.
And you kind of studied other stuff that might have.
Well, and even before leaping into, let's say, the subject areas that are more easily quantified, at some point, a student needs to move to the next phase of their experience, whether it's going from a younger grade to high school, from high school to college or university, or from whatever level of education into their working life. Do we not need some sort of fair comparison, level playing field to compare a whole bunch of people? And even if it's really hard to effectively quantify, do we not owe it to the student to have some sort of ranking system? And I know my bias is to say, yeah, we need that, but maybe that's not true.
I like the word that you used, ranking.
Okay.
And I wonder if that, if these grades pit students against each other as well as against themselves a little bit too. Is there friendly competition to be had without saying, I got this number and you got that number, and that automatically makes me superior to
Okay.
you
Well,
in some way?
for me, what this is coming down to is, what is the objective of all of this?
Mhm.
If the objective of all of this is to have wonderful learning so that you have skills and can do things, yeah, whatever inspires the individual student. But if the objective is to provide someone access to a scarce resource, like a position at a college or
Mhm.
university, you got to be able to compare apples to apples.
Mhm.
And that's true for philosophers, that's true for fine artists.
Well, let me ask you this. Whenever we've hired someone, including someone who was a student, who was an intern
Right.
or a co-op student, how much stake have you historically put in the numbers on, because
Okay.
sometimes you get access to that, sometimes you don't. How have you ever asked a potential employee, what'd you get in physics
Okay,
that
point
year?
well taken. No, I don't. I don't ever ask. I don't ever care. I don't think I often even know who has a degree and who doesn't have a degree.
Mhm.
And in fact, if I think back historically on some of the software developers we've had, some of the most talented, the most experienced, they come from a wide variety of backgrounds. I remember one individual who was a jazz guitar player. That was his formal career training, was as a jazz musician. He picked up software development as something he loved. And we can talk about the alignment of music and mathematics and programming another time. Someone else, a really great developer, started his career in the construction industry, had a terrible accident, and is now a video game developer. So I don't even know where he went to school or how that all played out. You make a good point that maybe when push comes to shove, it doesn't matter that much, but we're a boutique, relatively small business, right? We can make choices that way. I don't have to fill 100 or 1,000 or
positions at a
1,000
time. Yeah.
positions. I don't need a system, a rigorous system that can bear scrutiny under the fine eye
We
of
don't need our own
human
hiring
resource
calculus
right.
in order to find someone good.
And I'm not Harvard, who's deciding which people to let in
Mhm.
to their law program. They only have so many seats.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine. It is so firmly ingrained into our post-secondary application system. I think heads would implode if someone all of a sudden said, you're going to have to decide in another way who gets in and who doesn't than their numbers.
So is this conversation a thought experiment then? Like, are we saying ultimately the outcome needs to be some sort of comparable, if not quantifiable thing, but maybe the journey, just like this English teacher, right? The journey isn't, I'm going to grade every single thing you do, but there still is a final grade because it has to plug into some system. We can't live on Mars where we're creating a brand new system.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are
And not to
educational
assume anything about the Martians.
there are educational models, maybe even on Mars, that aren't built on grades or less reliant on grades. But yeah, they're usually small classes where there is that attention. And yeah, I think you're right. The system is built such that even if we really did want to drop this, if there was a collective decision, a collective sigh of relief, yay, we don't have to do this anymore, it would be really hard to implement it. It would be difficult to sort of pull it out of the fibers of how we learn and evaluate and assess.
Yeah. I think
Tricky stuff.
I feel like I skirted a question there about what evaluation could look like in the more quantitative of fields. Mathematics, science, engineering. I mean, that's my background. And I've often thought I got really good grades. You could even say that you and I were both in the top of our high school. I know I was and remain excellent at multiple choice. And better at multiple choice than necessarily the subject matter underlying the question. And so therein was a great example where I had a particular skill that gave me an unfair advantage to someone who might have had a reading difference or a logical difference, who could understand the underlying stuff just as well, but I was really good at that particular thing. So that's something that I remember from, and that's maybe more a high school thing than a university thing.
I sucked at multiple choice. Still do, probably. I don't have to do them very often. I avoid them. But I can explain my off on any given day. I was the one at the end of the exam. No one else was left. And I was still like, well, I have 2 more minutes. I can write another paragraph. Yeah, and I recognize that that's really difficult for some people too, that if you have a literacy difference or if you have other challenges, being able to explain yourself in such a way that you could be evaluated without a number, without multiple choice, with that sort of thing, could be really quite overwhelming and difficult.
And that's, I think, a really good point. And maybe what I would like to say next about my experience as a student and also as an educator and now as someone who hires these people. I always found that there was, I called it, I still do, like an academic triage, that you're given this pile of things to do, like a whole bunch of wounded soldiers arrive, and you have to pick where you put your energy. You have to make this terrible calculus as to where you can put your energy, where you can't, because you can't get it all done. And I found that I was really good at doing that, just like the multiple choice, not necessarily as good. So, there were some really hard things that were worth a fewer number of marks. You would just skip them, skip the assignment, skip the question, skip it entirely. And what that did for me, and I see this also in people that we work with, that we hire sometimes, if you had a really hard question, you would get used to skipping it. You would fill all of your available time and energy doing the easiest stuff in order. You would do a quick multiplication of the how much it's worth versus how hard it is, and you would do the most impactful thing. But those really hard things that were maybe less impactful on the mark, you would just leave them for later, and maybe you would never get to them. And so I know when I started my career, when I left school, I always wanted to go away and think about something. I had a boss, I remember my first boss, who would just stare at me. It's like, no, I'm asking you now, what do we do? And I never had my feet to the fire before. Even in exams, even in assignments, you had time to think. You could do that triage. There was nobody staring at you. And I don't know, in my entire academic career, I had a single oral examination until I did my master's defense. And I think that's a failing, not just because it's a great way to test if someone really knows something and they don't just have tools or a particular skill set of, I don't want to say cheating because it's not cheating, but of gaming the system to optimize your marks. But also, like, put someone under the pressure so that they have to answer now and they have to think on their feet. Because it's the thought process and the performance under pressure that is also very important. And that's something that you don't always see in new graduates.
So, what if talking about not being able to just burn the system down and start over again? Not being able to move to Mars and pretend all that never happened. What? Who?
No leaderboards on Mars.
Exactly. Yeah. None allowed. They take it away at the airport.
Don't tell Matt Damon.
Yeah. What if it's not a matter of getting rid of marks and grades altogether, outlawing the numbers, but just making a bigger menu, a bigger list of ways that you can get them, and making that available to everyone. And maybe this is kind of, a lead into life after school when we don't have, we're not evaluated with multiple choice tests anymore. I hope. And where it isn't about, writing 50-page essays and that sort of thing. When the way we're evaluated, the way we get our marks, quote unquote, changes. Work that into the school system too, that there's so many different ways that you can get those numbers instead of just multiple choice or this or that or these standard evaluations. Is that a good way to sort of introduce people into adult life when they're younger and in school? You're not going to be marked when you're a grown-up on this. You're going to be marked on that instead. And it's going to get, as you said, thrown at you at a moment's notice sometimes, and you're going to have to think on your feet. And so how do we go from childhood, and school where we're doing this and this and this to get our marks to adulthood? How do we prepare children for the next way that they're going to get the numbers, if we're going to have to stick with numbers?
Well, I mean, you and I have always been huge fans of co-op programs, internships. We've hired lots and lots of students in the middle of their journeys. High school kids can learn so much. I was super fortunate. I had a very interesting summer job. It was, science and engineering related, and it influenced my career path. I also learned a heck of a lot from that same first boss, right? So this was very, very early on. It's my belief that we have to weave together career experience with academic experience. And we're entering a world in which what is the value of specific knowledge? People have been saying that for 2 decades, ever since we could Google stuff.
We still haven't let go, have we?
We still haven't let go.
So let's jump into adulthood. I think a lot of us would like to believe that we left, the report cards and the marks and the letter grades and that behind. We graduated and, I don't need these anymore to be validated. I think we do. I don't think we ever outgrow it. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing, but I think this need for marks, please somebody give me a check, I think that sticks with us. And I wonder if we can come up with some examples of how in everyday life, in every career path, in every sort of lifestyle, we're still looking for those marks as adults.
As adults and as business leaders and managers too, right? We need to always be able to tell if someone's doing a good job. Their ongoing employment depends on it. Their promotion depends on it. We have to measure it, even if it is qualitative. There ought to be some sort of measurement always. And that's, we've all put up with performance reviews. And even if they're unclear and wishy-washy, something is happening on a regular basis that gives us that mark, that gives us some sort of feeling of ranking. Is that truly a necessity? I'm curious what you think about that.
I think it's hard to give it up. We want validation, and
so the employee wants validation.
And we want validation as employers. I made the right choice when I hired you, and we're getting where we want to go. We're meeting our objectives as an organization. I'm thinking of stuff outside of the employer-employee relationship too. We're looking for marks everywhere. I think everyone listening probably has a loyalty card somewhere, a punch card for a coffee shop. And in that case, it's being a good consumer, right? A good little capitalist that I got to the point, I got enough stars that I got a freebie, or I got enough points that I got a coupon. And we're still looking for that. And that's kind of at the essence of gamified learning, right? Even outside of the education system. We still want check marks. We still want to know we did a good job.
Well, you and I are not brainologists.
No.
Right? So it's not our intention to get into the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and reward. Where do those reward points sit on that spectrum? I'm just curious.
I don't know. I don't know that either. I do know that I don't think we outgrow the need to be told that we're doing well, that there's these objectives and these goals that we're supposed to meet in all kinds of areas of our lives. We want someone to come over and say, you did well. Good for you. Here's a sticker. Remember those smelly stickers we used to get? And
Scratch and
yeah,
sniff?
the scratch and sniff stickers.
Your 80s are showing.
Yeah, well, there you go. Proud of it. Proud of it. Maybe we miss that a little bit too, despite how hard it was for a lot of learners when they were younger to get a grade that they weren't crazy about. Or I think we still crave that. You want to be told that you're a good parent. You want to be told that you're a productive member of society. You want to be told that you're a nice friend. Do we need the numbers as we get older?
I don't know that we do. And I think, speaking personally, I think I need the numbers less and less and less. It's about the personal relationship. It's about the personal interaction. It's about the validation from a human that you respect and whose values align with yours. This makes me think about gamification in online learning, which was a buzzword. We've experienced this. We've had phone calls. Hello, I would like to buy 3 gamifications, please. And it's like, what are you even talking about? And a gamification might just be a leaderboard. It might just be giving someone a few stars when they do a quiz right. It's visual, and sometimes it's a little bit more engaging, but it's not different or, in my opinion, better learning. And that is kind of this extrinsic validation. It's like, here's a few stars. Do you feel better? Are you motivated? Well, maybe, maybe not. And I think the way it's all played out is what people really want is connection. What people really want is relationship with their the people who work for them, the people who they work for. And while great asynchronous learning can be visual and can be fun and can be game-based, I think what best aligns with everything that we've been talking about is that people really want to feel a part of something, and they want to feel valued
and heard.
So yeah, your performance review is important, and your score matters, and it will impact how much money you make. That's important. But what people will really remember are those leaders who made them feel good, who made them feel valued, who saw them, who thought about them, and who they thought about. That's my belief.
Well, that chokes me up a little, because I remember going through stacks of essays when I taught English. And I kept telling myself while I was marking, this is a conversation between me and the student. They've handed me this thing. They've said, this is what I think. This is as far as I got. This is what I've learned. This is how I feel. And I would cover them. I got notorious for using a purple pen. I would cover them with purple scribbles saying, ooh, interesting. Oh, okay, I get it. Or what about this? Or maybe you need to talk about that more. And the only thing that sort of saved me while marking 40, 50 of these things at a time was that it was a conversation, that I felt heard as an educator. I've been trying to teach you all this stuff and you got some of it. And I think my intention was to make them feel heard and connected. Here you go.
And in contrast, I remember one Christmas Eve being on the team of TAs who were grading first year calculus exams, being there till very late, grading hundreds and hundreds of them. I didn't feel any of that. So I think there's a world in which the grading experience is an experience. And you have a relationship, not just with your marks, with your status, with your ranking, but with your educators, with your managers, with your employees. There, did we solve it? On Mars?
Absolutely.
On Mars, there'll be relationships.
Gold star for you, okay. Ben. Top marks.
All right.
I'm going to put it on your transcript.
Thanks for learning with us.
If today's conversation sparked something for you, share it with someone you care about, or someone you're still figuring things out with.
You can find us online or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget,
we are all unfinished minds. Let's keep learning.